Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect within their communities. And this show is basically what we do is we interview former collegiate professional athletes and we talk about their transition out of sports, their journey to successful entrepreneurship and business leadership. And the whole idea is to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. There's a major issue today, whether it's financial literacy, mental health, other issues that athletes face, and we want to make a positive impact in that. So we're really excited today to have Blake Williams on with us. How you doing today, Blake?
Doing well, Rob. Thank you for having me on the show today.
You're welcome. So Blake's it's an interesting story. We kind of talking about before. My head was spinning with all the different things he does, but Blake was a college football player at Princeton, and then he went into the NFL as a coach, and he coached for many years in the NFL, and I'll share a little bit about that. And then he got the entrepreneurial bug, and doing other things with that too. He's a financial partner and advisor, wealth management, working with athletes. He has a sports media company where he's doing podcasts and TV shows. Maybe I'll get lucky. I'll get on one of those sometime. And then he also has he's a president of a tech startup, which he'll share a little bit about. So a lot of great things that Blake's doing. And usually what I do, Blake, is I start out is talk about playing sports growing up and how it shaped you leading up into college.
Yeah, great question. I had a interesting, life in sports. I kind of, been talking about this recently. Like I'm in my fourth stage, in sports, in the sports world now. But I grew up a multi-sport athlete. With former athlete parents, and then I grew up in the professional sports world, and so my father was a career coach, and a majority of my life, and still to this day, he's a professional football coach, right? So grew up around the profession, and so kind of gave us and taught us everything, right? Gave us everything, right? Little. Paid the bills, and whatnot, and kind of got when you grow up in it, you get a different, say, taste to what all goes into it, understanding from the professionalism aspect of it, like what real focus practice and, ongoing skill development and how to compete, right. And how to handle failure, how to handle, as a kid, honestly, growing up in the professional sports world, no different than a kid of a player or a kid of a parent. A parent that's a coach in it. Unfortunately, like you learn to deal with some of the negative sides of sports, from whether it be things you hear from the fans or trash talking or whatever like that. You deal with it like vicariously by hearing things that people in the stands are saying to your parents or the players that you love, and you think are like uncles to you or whatever as a little kid growing up, long before you learn how to compartmentalize those things and deal with them on the field. But a lot of life lessons in sports. I tell people all the time. I think it's the ultimate microcosm of life. Every season, it's like it's like a life under its own. I always told my players this as well too when I coached them. It's like reincarnation every year. You have this family, you come together, you have losses, wins. You have people get injured. It's almost like people that you lose in your life, in your family or whatever, like coming in and out of the team. You have adversity, you have joy, you have a lot of lessons learned, and then you go on and you do it again, the next year. And so it taught me a ton in life.
Yeah, you're right. There's a ton of life lessons in sports, and it's interesting too, like what you were saying, because I think a lot of times as fans, we don't necessarily, we're you might take a pot shot at your team or players or whatever, but it's real life, and you bring up valid points there, especially having a parent, whether it be a player or a coach, involved in that. I think sometimes fans probably don't take that into consideration. They really should. So let's fast forward to college. And, one of the things we talk about is ultimately the transition out of sports, whether it's transitioning out as a college athlete or if you're fortunate enough, a professional athlete. But when you went to school, was there programs there at Princeton that any like workshops or curriculum, and not just like the one day one, but things that would help the athletes ultimately in guiding them transitioning out of sports?
You know, I don't think there was a ton of that there, so to say, when I was there at Princeton. I will say this, obviously, I would say being a student athlete at Princeton is a little bit of a different monster than at a lot of other institutions in Division One institutions. We realize that even though a number of athletes go professional out of there. I mean, there was a young man that just deferred from his last year of eligibility to go into the NBA draft this past year out of there, a good player, and you see that sort of thing go on. I mean, it's an academic institution first, second, and third, and an athlete institution, fourth, so to say. So I think most people go in there. They always talk about it's a 40-year decision, not a 4-year decision, with that thought in mind of preparing for that life afterwards. But it's a very needed discussion in general
Right.
that needs to go on out there beyond just hey networking and some of those things that honestly frankly may be different than um, for athletes. What I mean by that is uh, I think as an athlete you have a degree of like your networking is what you do on the field, right? Like
Right.
do you turn on the film, come watch me, right? That's how you've always gotten to the next level. That's how you got to wherever you're playing in college or the pros anyways, right? Is the that aspect. And there's the competition and adversarial side of sports, so to say, is a little bit different from the connecting and networking side of business on who in order to get a chance to kind of show what and what you're about, sort of thing. And there's not necessarily your resume. There's not necessarily that like clearly on field, on the track, on the court, film or resume, so to say, in business life. And sometimes we don't know that we're so good at one other thing, and we're maybe underprepared at the other side of things. So I think the more that can be taught and the more programs that there can be for that ahead of time and have those conversations ahead of time, I think we can help solve a lot of issues on anxiety, depression, some of those things that happen when athletes leave the sport often not of their own volition. Somebody's told them you get off the train, you can't play anymore, right?
Right.
And you don't have a proper plan in place, and don't know what to do, so to say, and that can cause a lot of angst sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's we've talked and you and I talked a little offline about it too, but we've talked about going into some of these athletic departments and just helping them to develop additional curriculum or workshops. I had one guy on a previous podcast talked about he just wishes that he had like whether it was a 4 week workshop or a semester that as an athlete that they had to take that would have better prepared them for life after sports. And I think it's gotten better today with schools, but we're all about trying to provide additional an extension to the schools, and then maybe even also to like say the professional leagues, and which kind of leads me into my next question is as a coach in the NFL, were those some things that you did to help athletes transition out of sports, like when the like you said the time's coming that do coaches get involved with that at all?
Some coaches do, some coaches don't. I would say this: some of the very best coaches I've been around did, because coaching is teaching, coaching is mentoring, coaching is inspiring. Coaching is not like should not be at all levels, including the NFL level. Just hey, this is the way we've always done things before. Here, reading out of the playbook, do this drill, critique you on the film. You go your way, I go my way. Even though we're adults, sort of thing, right? I mean, it's if you want to effectively make people better versions of themselves or get them to do something that they want to and need to do, but that they either can't or don't want to do themselves, you have to be able to, I always say, you have to be able to reach in order to teach. And so you have to know what makes them tick, what motivates them, what goals they're trying to achieve, all those type of things, and then create the structure and connect it to to that standpoint, and then always be able to hold them accountable, not like in a draconian, Hollywood, sort of like carrot and the stick, sort of mentality, which we know is only works so much, and is only so effective, but in order to be able to reference back to, hey, hold accountable just by being able to again reference it back to like your goals where you want to get in life as well too. And so the very best I've been around kind of did do that, talk about plans, for later in their career. What do they want their career to look like? What do they want, their life after, sports to look like? But there are those resources, throughout, professional organizations. It's an organization by organization
Okay.
structure. There's not necessarily a set structure. It's kind of like state governments from that standpoint, right? So you can
Yeah.
have some variance and volatility in there from staff to staff, but they do try to do a good job with that, and giving those options to the players in the off season. And my thing is, I'd always try to just reinforce a lot of those aspects. Start having those conversations with them early. Talk to them about like using their time properly in the off season, whether it be, trying out like media type stuff, going on podcasts, going on like NFL Network, something like that, or going to, the Wharton Business School, some of these things that they have for, NFL alumni to be able to go and get, be a part of and get their MBAs, get their, do some of these programs in the off season, like go do those things.
No, that's great, and I think the athletes do need to tap into those resources. I think obviously, probably the better you are too. You're so focused when you're playing sports, but realizing that like you said, whether it's in the off season, just thinking about different ways to do it, and being open to people want to help. So being open to if your coaches are talking about different things, listen to them. I mean, it's all these relationships that you build. And one of the things, and you kind of touched on it before, but when we talk about networking, talk about the importance of networking while you're still playing.
Yeah, I can I honestly, I'll talk about it from a regret standpoint or the reverse standpoint. I mean, clueless of it. When I was playing, like I was the ultimate. I was kind of talking to my former self, and I was talking earlier, right? I mean, I was a intense, vicious competitor. It was very much like a zero sum game. Like anywhere I was playing, any time, like there was going to be a winner, going to be a loser. We were going to compete within the rules, but like I was gonna try to impose my will on you and make you bow, sort of thing. That's just how I was. That's how I grew up, and that's one way to be with inside the white lines, right? But we have to know how to step outside the white lines and
Right.
be intentional. And so I think me personally, I remember back to that. I mean, I kicked myself, being at Princeton and clearly, okay, I was going to go coach, and whatnot, but clearly not, going to go play in, professional or whatnot. But was so focused on, hey, like so much of my time and energy on what I needed to do to get my body, mind right, like take that one little 1% to be able to compete even harder, better, and stuff like that, and not necessarily, you know, overly thinking about all that or concerned about that stuff for the next life and really clueless about it. And it really is. And in sports, even in team sports, right, it's still so much like on your back, so to say, in terms of like you're going to get what you deserve, get what you work for, and stuff like that. And in business and life, it's like we talk about like work smart, not hard. Be good to people, be good by people. But I've learned this is, and I tell my players this, I tell my young financial advisors this. People in my multiple business now is connecting people. I mean, connected people are connecting people, right? And there's this inherent value in that, and right, and just being a connector with people, getting to know people, kind of same way you and I got to know each other, and then and led to this right here, right? But it all started with just being open to a conversation in a networking group, so to say, and then realizing similarities, realizing synergies, right? And so you gotta go out and do that, do those things outside of just say like a college party or whatever it is, right? Something be intentional about it and think about your future. Think about your future the same, in job or whatever, the same way you did with getting to this skill, in football or basketball or whatever in sports, getting to this time of being able to run or swim, getting to this amount to be able to lift, in your, in some of your goals and whatnot, that same sort of intentionality. And then like, how do I get there? Right. Athletes are pretty dang good at doing this. We just have to shift this mind focus or have somebody shift it for us to real life, so to say. And I feel like if you can do that and connect that well, like, athletes will be like, oh, okay, I get it, and
Right.
run with it, you know.
Yeah, it's and even like the timing we talked about, just like while you're still playing, obviously, especially if you've got a name. I mean, people are looking up to you as an athlete, and they're, so that's the time to make those connections, and it's all about relationships. And I always talk about networking and the importance of paying it forward, and having that helping mentality. And I think people want to do that. And I mean, we encourage, even if you think about, back when you were playing in high school, it's just and not just athletes in general, just connecting, like, utilizing those friendships, whether it be, the parents of some of your friends, or just the business that you work there. There's always people that are willing to mentor. But I was talking to one agent, and he just said that that's a failing of a lot of players, that they don't network when they're still playing. So then when they're done, they're like, okay, well, here we go. I'm expecting this big job, big sales job, whatever. And it's not necessarily the case. So definitely tap in and make sure that you are doing that, while you're still active. And kind of a byproduct of that, and we talk about mentors and other things like that. Obviously, Alumni Direct, we're all about alumni connection. So when you were at Princeton, was there a push from the school to bring former alumni athletes back to work with the athletes, and not as, where they're coming back for like the homecoming game or golf tournament, but more interacting with the athletes?
Yeah, there totally was that. And I'll tell you this, I mean, Princeton does a phenomenal job on the alumni and networking side of things. They really do, both on the athletes and just in general, right? I mean, you know, they're the every single summer, right, at Princeton University, there is a reunion for every single class, right? It's not like the fifth year reunion, the ninth year reunion. It's like Princeton reunions is this huge event. It's a fun event as well too. I mean, it's like literally, it's amazing for a school that has about, 1,500 kids graduating, every year. I think Princeton reunions every summer is like the second largest selling
Wow.
event for Budweiser every year, behind the Daytona 500. I mean, it's literally, about 40 to 50,000, alumni descend on campus, and you
Wow.
usually have, like this past summer, I think, like, you'll usually have at least one surviving member from every class, dating back to like this last year. I think it was like 1937 or whatever there, and whatnot. So from class of 1937 to the class of 19 or 2023 or whatever it was, members back from all those classes, and we've got, alumni chapters, right, in like every kind of area. Like, I'm in Cleveland right now, so we've got like the PANO, the Princeton Association of Northern Ohio, up here. But they did do things for the athletes, as well too. Coming back in, career nights, kind of some of those networking type nights when they were upperclassmen, getting them up to the Princeton clubs, so to say, in New York City, and meeting, people, and that whole side of things. Again, one more thing that I wish I would have taken more of advantage of there.
Yeah.
Like, my whole thing was like, I'm going to play until I can't play anymore, and then I'm going to be a football coach, a professional football coach, And so I was like, hey, I love talking to people and meeting people, but I don't need this, right?
Right.
And as a young, it's not about need, honestly, it's not. It's not about, needing it. It's about, connecting with people. So you don't know when you're ever going to need it anyways. And that's, I think, one thing I try to educate people on as well too, is it's like not about need. It's not about a handout, networking, making friends, business friends and stuff like that. Like, if you wait until you actually do need something to try to go do it, yeah, you're going to find out how lonely and hard that is. That's not how it works. It's just like the sweat equity you put into all those years of sports to get to where you're going. You have the same thing in kind of networking equity and friendship equity. That you gotta build up until you can potentially find synergies or cash value in that.
Right, right, and to your point too. I mean, I know that like Princeton, the other Ivy League schools and fraternities and sororities, they just do a great job of with their alumni base. But it's important
Mm-hmm.
to tap into it. I mean, they're there to help. So another topic I always like to talk about, and uh, sometimes controversial, but NIL, name, image, likeness. So give me your thoughts, positive and negative.
I'm a big proponent of NIL. It's funny. I can remember even before going to Princeton, right? I mean, it's been a hot button topic for so long. So I can remember in like the year 2000, right? Like writing a research paper as a whatever I want to say it was a senior in high school. On this aspect of just arguing for this and that. Literally the only people that the games can't be played with are the players, right? Like at some point in time, all of these things started as a simple game. We talk about Princeton, like Princeton literally invented the game of football, and Princeton and Rutgers played the first game in 1869 right there in New Jersey. And I'm pretty sure there was no refs. There was no coaches there. There was no agents there. There were no sponsors there. There was definitely no NCAA. I know that for a factor. A fact because it was Princeton, Harvard, and Yale that uh, kind of got that whole thing started. The NCAA started, and whatnot. But there was none of that stuff. But the games were played, right? And so I think a lot of people make a ton of money off of these athletes,
Right.
and they should be they take on a ton of risk, and they should be able to make something off of that, right? There's no other, so to say, like industry in our country at least, where that's the case, right? I mean, I talked about this even at the time back when I played. I had friends, I had really smart kids, that I knew growing up that like didn't take their ride to Princeton, or they didn't take, they were just academics, but they didn't take their offer to Princeton or their admittance to Harvard or whatever, and they instead like took their admittance to Rice because they got literally a six-figure um, check essentially, right, to be a research fellow, and they're one of the top students in the country and all sort of things, so they're getting a full ride academic scholarship, so full scholarship, just like athletes are getting, but then they're getting $100,000 salary on top of it, right?
Wow.
Their mental gifts, but the athletes bringing in way more money to the institution, um, and but isn't able to, right? And so like that was some of my arguments at the time as well too, like that there are other kids around here that are getting scholarship plus like off of their
Yeah.
talents, and athletes aren't, but they're bringing in way more, and so I'm all for it. I'm probably as far on the other side of things, if we want to get really down the rabbit hole of like there should be revenue sharing. They should get aspects of it. It's a professional system that is being tried to keep as an amateur system, and that violates a lot of antitrust laws and stuff like that. That everybody doesn't want to. I don't know. The NCAA really wants that battle, and whatnot, but. I go back to and I sit there and I think about the top four. I know I can list them off the top of my head right now: Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, University of Texas. Last year, those combined athletic departments. Just Rob, I'd ask you this off the top of your head, not to put you on the spot. What do you think those four combined athletic departments brought in on athletic department revenue last year? If you had to guess,
I'm sure it's a staggering number. I mean, is it on the other side of a billion or not quite that much?
a little bit, a little bit over a billion, right? A little bit over a billion. They averaged a little over, those four averaged over. They each were right at or just slightly over 250 million a piece,
Wow.
right? And the athletes and athletes saw none of that, right? And so there's a way to solve for some of that, and whatnot. And so I'm all for them them getting their piece, right?
Yeah.
Not to get long winded, but we don't even sit there. We talk about football players, we talk about some of this other stuff, but like think about like NIL darlings like Libby Dunn, right?
Yeah.
She is a female gymnast,
Right.
okay, right? She's a female gymnast. So let's combine those two things together, all right? At 22 years old, when she graduates college,
Right.
right? her the way it works with she's retired as a gymnast, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a football player, a basketball player, male or female, like they may be able
Right.
to go professionalize at
Right.
22 years old. Somebody like her that's made a big time brand and made a lot of money off of her name, image and likeness. Like that's at the end of her career. So if she wasn't able to do it in college, right, from 18 to 22, in the
Right.
twilight, so to say, of her career, when would she be able to do it? And what about some of those other sports where there's not really, so to say, professional, really monetizable professional rank, so to say, right?
Right.
Of the same nature. If you say lacrosse or something like that, the amount of money that's made in the NCAA and major lacrosse, especially for the big time top programs, is pales in comparison to maybe any similar like
Sure.
pro leagues or semi pro leagues there are, right? So when, if not then, when are they going to
Right.
be able to monetize off of that? And so they should be able to.
Yeah, and I think the biggest, I guess the only downside that you hear people talking about is just the lack of education, because there are
Hmm.
issues with just and just being in the financial space, just whether it's not understanding that they have to pay taxes and things like that. So there's a more of a need for education. But I totally agree. I mean, it's definitely been a great opportunity. So let's talk about your transition out of sports. I mean, you played sports your whole life growing up, and now it's time to hang up the cleats from a player perspective from Princeton. Talk about your transition out, and then maybe talk about and then giving advice to other athletes of things that they can do, for that next journey.
Yeah, totally. My transition was one straight into coaching, and straight into professional coaching. So I didn't really ever leave the competition, so to say. I had a different transition, which I don't think we talk about enough either, which is the transition from coach, or player straight into coach, and being able to make that shift from player to coach, which is really it is a shift. And I've seen guys who played for 10 years in the NFL, right, all of a sudden, make the shift into coaching, and they're 4 years into their coaching career. And I'll joke, but I'm trying to get the point across to them as well too. I was like, man, you're still an intern. Like you still
Right.
haven't made you're still not a coach. Like
Right.
you're a mentor, right? Like you still haven't made the transition into coaching yet. Like you're
Right.
still acting like a player, talking like a player, interacting with the players like a player,
Right.
versus a former player that's now a coach. Like there can be a thin veil there, but there is a veil there, where you have to step outside the arena and be a teacher and be on the sideline. But for athletes, especially athletes that aren't going into coaching or even maintaining that side of the competition, I think it's something you got to get in front of. It's something I would argue, say have a plan for ahead of time, have those conversations ahead of time, start trying out what you would like ahead of time. I mean, just think about it. It's like you went on multiple. If you played in college, like you probably went on multiple visits. You looked at multiple schools. How did you settle on your favorite food or your favorite drink or your favorite flavor, or whatever it may be, your favorite outfit, right? You wore a bunch of outfits before you found your favorite shirt, or ate a lot of foods before you settled on your favorite food. So why would I just like absentmindedly go into a profession or job or whatever without really thinking about it, put some thought into it, testing the waters, and multiple different things. And I would say as an athlete, a lot of times there's internships or like career days, right? Shadowing type opportunities, in part that maybe you wouldn't have options to if you weren't, an athlete or a top athlete, that you should take advantage of and do, and figure out what you want to do and have that plan ahead of time, so that you don't fall into that rut, which I see happen way too often, which is we've lived such a structured life, kind of beholden to the schedule, so to say,
Yeah.
in that life that maybe is stressful to people on the outside looking in, but there's a level of comfort for athletes who have embraced the process inside. They don't have to think about all those things. It's like they know where they've got to be, when they've got to be, and they've got to do it, and what their plan is, and somebody's always coaching them and telling them and pushing them and that whole sort of thing, that support system. And when all of a sudden now they're done, they're out, and if they don't have a job, and they don't have that schedule now, all of a sudden they don't have a plan, that in and of itself can create a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of mental health issues. Um, you take the competition away, you take the endorphins of like training and competition away, the camaraderie and the kind of familial, like there's a lot of things on just like human interaction and connection, that you get because as a part of a team. Like there's a lot of self isolation that can happen sometimes. As athletes, maybe we're not always the best at talking about our problems, so to say. And the moral of the story I can tell you is just try to have those conversations. I'm trying to do that now even more in my
Right.
current life, is have those conversations and have those plans ahead of time, and get out ahead of things.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I think that's yeah. The challenge it always becomes that a lot of these athletes they think of themselves still as the athlete. Blake the football player, Rob the runner, Susie the swimmer, Bill the baseball player, whatever. But they're not looking at themselves as hey, you got a long life ahead of you, and just use those skills that you develop as an athlete. I mean, there's just wonderful skill sets that people want to hire athletes and people want to work with athletes. So I think you should
Mhm.
definitely looking at doing those kind of things. So now let's talk about what you're doing today. And I kind of joked before it's kind of like the Blake commercial. Now you're doing so much, so
Mhm.
we gotta get the Reader's Digest version. But talk a little about some of the things you're doing and how people can find you.
Yeah, and so appreciate you, Rob. I know I joke. I say like this is retirement, right? Like for me. But hey, I because I so choose. I'm wearing this today, and I'm sitting in my home office, versus one of my actual offices, because I can. Right, because I'm the boss, and I can choose to partition that schedule up, whenever I want to, and whatnot. And some of those things I couldn't do in coaching, or some of those other things. But I'm a partner and a financial advisor at a big private wealth management firm called Lakefront Capital, here in Cleveland. I deal heavily in financial planning and financial coaching in the sports world, both for individuals, athletes, coaches, scouts, stuff like that, but then also businesses, and then also endowments. In part, we talked about NIL as well too. I kind of pioneered this aspect of getting taking on collectives in athletic departments as institutional clients as well too, and setting up kind of institutionally, professionally managed endowments for them. Trying to again get ahead of things. Don't tell me why we can't do these things.
Right.
Hey, let's do something where we can control it ourselves. You guys can control it yourselves and self fund these things. 4 or 5 years down the line. And then I'm also the president of a big tech startup, in the sports and entertainment world. Um, it's called Next Level. Athletes, you should check it out. There's an app, free app on the App Store. We've also got a superior kind of link in bio type service, as well too, as one of our other product stacks called our Connect Link. But check it out. Um, and then I'm also a partner and then a host myself on my own show of the fastest growing media company in the U.S. Big Play Media, and my show, which I co-host with my very quotable, very known, and kind of animated father, is my co-host, but it's called the Come Get Some show, which Come Get Some was all kind of always our tagline, our mantra, kind of our attitude of how we played and coached and whatnot. And so kind of do the three verticals, is what I do now, and then be a dad, coach little league sports.
Now I will tell you that the transition out of that might be harder than your transition out of sports yourself. So when you enjoy those years, because when you get to the end of the journey with your kids playing, then you're like, okay, what do I do next? And you'll get that
Mhm.
next chapter for sure. And it's cool that you do the podcast or the show with your dad. My son's a podcast host, and I think there's one time he does a daily show on the Mets called Locked On Mets, and it was a Back to the Future show, and he did 3 episodes, and I was co-hosting with him on the 3 episodes, and basically we took it through his journey of like playing little league, playing travel baseball, and going up and ultimately doing what he does today. So it was kind of cool. So it's fun doing that. I'm sure your dad has a blast.
No doubt, no doubt. I mean, and you said it's cool to have that father son time, and one of the things we're really enjoying about it as well too is like we get to have a different so celebrity guest, and it's like it's our ex players, right? On the show, most of these guys that are out of sports. So in part, I'm using that aspect to kind of connect with them and get a chance to have that camaraderie again, selfishly with us, but then two, kind of shed a light on, like we talked about as well too. Hey, what are you doing now? It's like, these guys are investors. These guys are in sports media, and they have their own big shows and followings and whatnot. They're Division I college foot head coaches, now and whatnot. And so I'm trying to use that platform as well too, of like talking to current athletes who maybe follow the show, of like, hey, here are guys, that I used to coach, here are what they're doing now. Let's have conversations about that and kind of give you, a role model on that. And then we also try to always spotlight kind of a spotlight charity or a charity, at the closing kind of remarks of the show as well too.
Oh, that's great. It's definitely a lot of fun. So, old school, how do people find you?
Old school, how do people find me?
Are you
Kind
like
of
www dot now? We'll get.
I'm on everything. So I'm on every social media platform out there, including my own Next Level, right? That I'm the president of. But Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Blake Williams, or usually some version of like Coach Blake Williams is the tag. Again, Come Get Some Show is our shows, and we've got a separate YouTube channel, separate Twitter channel, IG channel, all those for the show, for all that stuff out there as well too. But you guys can find me out there pretty easily, I think.
Oh, that's great. I mean, you can find us on alumnidirect.com, and the show is on our YouTube channel as well as across all the different podcast networks. And we're on Facebook and X and TikTok and all that. But we really encourage people to watch these shows or listen to the podcast. It's just I think there's a lot of issues with athletes transition out of sports, and we want to make a positive impact in just helping them through whatever the challenge might be, and just having great guests like Blake on here that share their stories to again teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So Blake, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great.
Appreciate you, Rob. I appreciate you and all your viewers.
Oh, thank you. Take care, everybody.